So for more than 100 years, this doll has become one of the most feared objects on the entire planet. We're talking about Robert the doll. And the story behind him is so intense that today he's literally kept behind glass and has this very strange set of rules you have to follow.
And this isn't, a friendly suggestion. It's a straight up warning. It's the very first thing you see when you walk up to his exhibit at the Fort East Martell Museum down in Key West. And trust me, as we're about to find out, people ignore that warning at their own risk.
Okay, but here's where it gets really weird. This doll gets mail, a lot of mail. We're talking hundreds of letters every single year from all over the globe. But get this, they're not fan letters. Nope, they're apology letters, which, leads to the big question. Why on earth are all these people saying sorry to a doll? All right, to really get what's going on, let's start with where he is right now. So Robert is sitting there, locked inside a glass case, holding this little stuffed lion. But he's not by himself. The walls all around him are just plastered with these letters. We're talking handwritten notes, desperate pleas, even little gifts, all from people who are absolutely convinced they've been cursed by him. And the stories are just chillingly similar. You have a tourist who laughs, snaps a picture without asking, and then boom, gets into a car accident just hours later. There's a couple that made fun of the whole thing, and they have a massive relationship-ending fight that same night. Another guy loses his job. And maybe the wildest one? A newlywed couple discovers their wedding photos have just been erased. What's the one thing they all have in common? They disrespected the doll. And let's go back to that couple who broke up for a second. The craziest part is that without talking to each other, they both felt this overwhelming need to write to the museum and apologize to Robert. I mean, they went from total skeptics to believers in just one night. They were completely convinced they had ticked off whatever is inside that doll. But it's not just the visitors who get the weird stuff. Oh no. The museum staff, they've got their own stories. They've reported this constant flow of creepy activity ever since Robert showed up. For them, this whole haunting thing is just part of the job. Apparently, inside the museum, things get even more intense. The staff say electronics just go completely haywire near his case. We're talking phone batteries draining in seconds, security cameras just blinking off, and get this, even the museum director, who is a total skeptic, became a believer. He secretly put little marks on the floor around Robert's chair, and the next morning, it had moved. The vibe got so bad, so oppressive, that some staff members just quit. They couldn't handle being around him. So, okay, we've seen the results, right? The fear, all those apology letters, but how did we get here? To understand the why behind all this, we need to rewind. We're going all the way back to the beginning, to a little boy in Key West more than a century ago. Let me introduce you to Robert Eugene Otto, but everyone just called him Gene. He was born into this really well-known family in Key West back in the early 1900s. He was a creative kid, loved art, but his entire life was about to be defined by a present he got when he was only 4. And man, the connection was immediate. In 1904, Gene gets this doll and they become completely inseparable. He actually gives the doll his own name, Robert, and tells everyone, from now on, you call me Gene. But then things got weird. His parents started hearing 2 different voices coming from his room, Gene's voice and this other, deeper one. And anytime something got broken or furniture was knocked over, Gene had the exact same excuse every single time. It was simple. It wasn't me, it was Robert. Robert did it. That was his line for everything. It got so creepy that neighbors swore they saw the doll moving on its own, appearing in different windows of the house. Gene's parents were, understandably, freaked out. So they finally locked Robert up in a chest and stuck him in the attic, and that's where he stayed for years. But that was far from the end of it. So fast forward a bunch of years. Gene's all grown up now. He's a successful artist. He gets married to a woman named Annette Parker. It looks like a totally normal life, right? A clean slate. But then his parents pass away, and he and Annette decide to move back into his childhood home. And one of the very first things Gene does, he heads straight for the attic to find his old friend. And he finds him. And just like that, the childhood obsession comes roaring back, maybe even stronger than before. He actually builds a special little room just for the doll up in the turret of the house with its own tiny furniture and everything. For his wife, Annette, this was an absolute nightmare. She was terrified of this doll, completely convinced it was evil. But Gene, He didn't care. He would just lock himself away in that room for hours and hours, painting with Robert, totally shutting his wife out of his life. You can really see how destructive this all was in what happened after Jean died in 1974. And some people say he died with Robert right there in the bed with him. Annette, she didn't waste a second. She sold that house as fast as she could. And when she gave the doll to the new owner, what she said pretty much sums up Jean's entire life, a life just totally controlled by this one object. So what's the deal with Robert, really? What is he? Over the years, a few different theories have popped up trying to explain his, let's call it, unusual power. Is he a curse, just a regular old toy, or something else? This is where we get this big clash between the legend and the actual facts. On one side, you've got the famous story, the Voodoo legend, that Robert was made by a servant who was mad at the Otto family and cursed the doll. But then you have what the museum found when they actually analyzed him, and it tells a totally different story. Turns out he's not stuffed with human hair. It's just wood shavings. And the way he's made, it's a dead ringer for toys made by the famous German company Steiff from that exact time period. Okay, so if the whole voodoo curse story is probably not true, that leaves us with a massive question, right? This doll was most likely just a factory-made toy. So how in the world did it become so haunted? Well, that leads us to another theory. And honestly, this one might be even creepier. The idea here is that Robert isn't possessed by some kind of demon, but by the spirit of an actual child, a child connected to the Otto family. Some people think it might be the spirit of an illegitimate daughter of Jean's dad. Now, that would actually explain why so many people claim to see the ghost of a little girl, both at the museum and in Jean's old house. So in this theory, the doll isn't the evil thing, it's just a container. Of course, we have to consider another angle. Maybe, after 100 years of spooky stories and pure fear, we've kind of made him haunted ourselves. You know, the power of suggestion is a real thing. Whatever you believe, there's no denying it. Robert's story has locked in his spot in paranormal history. In fact, his whole creepy biography is what inspired the horror movie Chucky. I mean, think about that. He went from being this weird local legend in Key West to a full-blown global pop culture icon. And all of this leaves us with one last really unsettling question. When you look back at the absolute control he had over Jean Otto's life, and then you look at how he still commands fear and, weirdly, respect from thousands of people today, you just have to ask yourself, was Robert ever really just a toy? Or was he the one pulling the strings all along?